chambers in order.
Order.
His skills from Saturday, bring it in today.
Yeah. Order. This is Victoria's voice.
Page 426. Page 427. Page 428. Page 429. Page 430. Page 431. Page 432. Page 433. Page 434. Page 435. Page 436. Page 437. Page 438. Page 439. Page 440. Page 441. Page 442. 443. 444. Paper 45. Page 446. Four 47. 448. 449. 450. 451. 452. 453. 454. 455. 456. 456, yeah, Sandalio.
1. Other principal officers, not professor, but the university librarian. It should be Ezra.
Secretary, take note. 457. 458. 459. 460. 461. 462. 463.
462, sorry.
462.
2. Yeah. Each faculty board shall consist of
What number on 462?
46272.
What was your observation?
There should be no S under 72
Secretary, take note.
shall consist of.
Thank you. 463. 464. 465. 'Senator Suleiman Unkui, Kaduna North.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Suleiman Ngui. I do move for the adoption of the votes and proceedings of Thursday, the 29th of September 2016. I do move.
Senator Clifford Odia, Edo Central.
My name is Senator Clifford Odia, representing Edo Central. I rise to support the motion that the votes and proceedings of 29 September 2015 be approved. I so second.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor that the votes and proceedings of Thursday, 29 September 2016 be approved as amended, say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Votes and proceedings of Thursday, 29 September 2016 is hereby approved as amended. Announcements. Letter from Mr. President. Dear distinguished Senate President, submission of the 2017-2019 medium-term expenditure framework and fiscal strategy paper. I'm pleased to submit the 2017-2019 medium-term expenditure framework (MTEF) and fiscal strategy paper (FSP) to the National Assembly. Let me use this medium to express my gratitude for the enduring partnership between the legislative and executive arms of government. In particular, I note with appreciation the commitment and support that distinguished senators have continued to demonstrate with respect to the preparation, passage, and implementation of the federal budget. Pursuant to provisions of the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2007, the preparation towards the submission of the 2017 budget to the National Assembly is progressing well. The MTEF and FSP, which provide the framework for the development of the 2017 budget, was designed against the backdrop of a generally adverse global economic environment, as well as fiscal challenges in the domestic economy. In this regard, the 2017-2019 MTEF and FSP articulates the federal government's economic, social, and developmental objectives, as well as the strategies for achieving these defined objectives and priorities. I hereby forward the 2017-2019 MTEF and FSP to the distinguished Senate and trust that it will be kindly considered, expeditiously approved, so as to move the 2017 federal budget process forward. Please accept, distinguished Senate President, the assurances of my highest consideration. Yours sincerely, Momodu Buhari. On behalf of our colleagues, I want to announce and congratulate our distinguished colleague, Senator Bukaba Ibrahim, whose birthday was on the 1st of October, and also Senator Lidani, also, whose birthday also was the 1st of October. I congratulate you both. Your special days as birthday on our Independence Day. Wish you many, many years, good health and prosperity. I wish to acknowledge the presence of members of the Political Science Department, Umaru Musa Yar'Adua University, Katsina State, and also staff and students of Babji International School, Ladima, Mawa, Abuja, who are in a gallery to observe our Senate proceedings. I wish them all a fruitful observation of the Senate proceedings. You may all sit down. Any petitions? Senator Mao Wabner.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, my name is Senator Mao Aruko Wabunwa, representing the entire people of Abia North Senatorial District. Mr. President, I have two petitions from two of my constituents. The subjects look a little bit the same. One is from Sergeant Godwin Eze against the Nigerian Police Force and the Nigerian Police Service Commission for non-payment of his pension and other accruing benefits since January 1980, when he was discharged from the Nigerian Police Force. So he's sending this petition to this distinguished House, the Senate, so we could do justice at least to help him get the police to pay him his entitlement. That is the first petition, Mr. President. Do I have your petition to also permission to read the second one? So the second one is from a constituent too, Mrs. Onukaha Caroline, a member of my constituency too. She's complaining about unjust treatment and termination of her appointment by her employer, the Central Bank of Nigeria, since the 28th day of January 2015. So she's requested that we should look at this, we should look at this case and let justice be done. By your permission, Mr. President, may I lay these two petitions on the table? Mr. President.
Yeah, come and lay the petitions.
Thank you.
Petitions referred to ethics and privileges. I'm back in 2 weeks. Petitioner, Senator. That's your draft.
Your Excellency, the Senate President, distinguished colleagues, my name is Senator Omotayo Alashuadura, representing the people of Ondo Central Senatorial District. Mr. President, I have this petition from my constituent, ASP Jacob Olojuola, appealing for reinstatement on compassionate grounds since his dismissal from the Nigerian police in 2004. My constituent seeks the intervention of the Senate to reconsider his case. May I have the leave of the Senate President to lay the petition, sir?
Yeah, come and lead the petition. Petition is referred to ethics and privileges. Back in 2 weeks. Before we go to the first business of the day, just to remind our committees that one of our resolutions we agreed was the issue of oversight. And I'm hoping that the leader will tell us a bit about that, so that, because the sooner we start that as part of our own resolution in trying to see where we are in 2016 implementation. Leader of the Senate.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. Just to let my colleagues know that the timetable, the tentative timetable that we prepare for the oversight will be out tomorrow, so that we will go on the oversight effectively. Having said that, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the first business of the day is presentation of a House bill standing in my name on the Chartered Institute of Human Capital Development of Nigeria Establishment, etc. Bill 2016. Mr. President, you may wish to invite the Clerk of the Senate to read the short title of the bill.
Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, Chartered Institute of Human Capital Development of Nigeria Establishment, etc. Bill 2016, HB 28, first reading.
Chartered Institute of Human Capital Development of Nigeria Establishment, etc. Bill 2016, HB 28, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Seems the microphone is.
Function from here.
Come from there. Thank you. Can function from here. Okay. Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. The second business of the day is still presentation of a House bill standing in my name on the Petroleum Training Institute Act, Cap P16, Laws of the Federation of Nigeria 2004, Amendment Bill 2016. Mr. President, you may wish to invite the Clerk of the Senate.
Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, Petroleum Training Institute Act, Cap P16, LFN 2004, Amendment Bill 2016, HB 251, first reading.
Petroleum Training Institute Act Cap P16 LFN 2004 Amendment Bill 2016 HB 251 first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
It's on, sir. Go and help him put it on.
Thank you, Mr. President and distinguished colleagues. The third business of the day is also presentation of a House bill standing in my name on the Advance Fee Fraud and Other Related Offences Act number 14 of 2006 Amendment Bill 2016. Mr. President, you may wish to invite the Clerk of the Senate to read the short title of the bill.
Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, Advanced Fee Fraud and Other Related Offences Act number 14 of 2006 Amendment Bill 2016, HB 287, first reading.
Advanced Free Fraud and Other Related Offences Act number 14 of 2006 Amendment Bill 2016 HB 287 first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
The fourth business of the day is presentation of a House bill standing in my name on the Value Added Tax Act Cap 6, Laws of the Federation of Nigeria 2004 Amendment Bill 2016. Mr. President, you may wish to invite the Clerk of the Senate to read the short title of the bill.
Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, Value Added Tax Act Cap V1 LFN 2004 Amendment Bill 2016 HB 293 first reading.
Value Added Tax Act Cap V1 LFN 2004 Amendment Bill 2016 HB 293 first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
The fifth business of the day is presentation of a House bill standing in my name on the Veterinary Surgeons Act Cap V3, the Laws of Federation of Nigeria 2004 Amendment Bill 2016. Mr. President, you may wish to invite the Clerk of the Senate to read the short title of the bill.
Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, Veterinary Surgeons Act Cap V3 LFN 2004 Amendment Bill 2016 HB 294 first reading.
Veterinary Surgeons Act Cap V3 LFN 2004 Amendment Bill 2016 HB 294 first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the sixth and the seventh business of the day is supposed to be presentation of two reports. Unfortunately, the chairman of the Committee on Education Tertiary is not around, and the chairman of Air Force also told me that the report is not ready. So we stand down the two bills to another.
Chairman Air Force, why is the report not ready?
Thank you, Mr. President, and Grover Shea representing Kitchenot, Centurion District. Mr. President, I come and see you privately. Just plead guilty. It's not guilty, the report is not yet ready, but we have some issues to clear with you.
Distinguished colleagues, you could all recollect we took some decisions right at the beginning of these sessions on the issue that we are very short of time, number of days, and we need to keep to this program and the other paper. So please ensure that anytime we slate your reports, they must be ready and we must be able to receive and dispense of them as quick as possible. So when will the report be ready? Senator Fashe, when will the report be ready? Fairly next week, we must have your report, right? Okay. Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President and distinguished colleagues. The eighth business of the day is also presentation of report on the Committee on Sports on the National Lottery Act 2005 Amendment Bill 2016. Mr. President, you may wish to invite distinguished Senator Obina Ogba, Chairman of the committee, to move the motion for the Senate to receive the report.
Senator Bina Ogba, Ebonyi Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Senator Obina Ogba. I represent Ebonyi Central Senatorial District, Ebonyi State. Distinguished colleagues, I hereby move that the Senate do receive the report of the Committee on Sports on the National Lottery Act 2005 Amendment Bill 2016 SB 227 to be laid. I so move.
Senator Buhari.
Thank you, Mr. President. My distinguished colleague, Buhari Abdul Fattah, I move to second a motion that Senator Obina, we do receive the Committee on Sports report on national lottery as moved by Senator Obina. I so second.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor that the Senate do receive the report of the Committee on Sports on the National Lottery Act 2005 Amendment Bill 2016 SB 227, say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Senator Obina, come and lay your report. Leader of the Senate.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. The first order of the day is a motion standing in the name of distinguished Senator Baba Kaka, Bashir Garbai, and many others on the mounting humanitarian crisis in the Northeast. Mr. President, you may wish to invite distinguished Senator Baba Kaka, Bashir Garbai, to move the motion.
Senator Babaka Gabai.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I remain Senator Babakaka Bashir Garbai. I represent Borno Central Senatorial District. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, from the starting of this 8th Senate to date, the Senate leadership and also the other senators have done a lot with regards to bringing the insurgency in the northeastern part of the country to end. Some of the efforts have already some of the efforts have already achieved some results. We have been under a lot of pressure from our constituents. Because of that, we are compelled to come up with a motion on humanitarian crisis in the Northeast. For the avoidance of doubt, my constituency, that is the Borno Central Senatorial District, is the epicenter of the Boko Haram crisis. At a point, the headquarters of the Boko Haram was Balabulingaranam within Maiduguri metropolis. Now, the headquarters of the Boko Haram still remain Sambisa Forest, the infamous Sambisa Forest. That underscores the need for us to get concerted efforts from our colleagues in order to bring this problem to an end. Therefore, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the Senate notes with grave concern the unfolding humanitarian crisis in the northeastern part of the country. In the words of Arjan Dewaj, UNICEF's chief of nutrition in Nigeria, while granting an interview on Friday, September 9th, 2016 in Abuja, and I quote, "We haven't found the right words to describe the magnitude of the crisis," referring to the crisis in the Northeast. The Senate further notes that the UNICEF report indicates that 4.5 million people are in dire need of assistance, out of which 1 million people are in danger of extreme malnutrition. The Senate observes the recent report by the Financial Times that about 2 million people are beyond the reach of aid and at risk of starvation in northeastern part of Nigeria, according to a senior UN official. And Western diplomats have described the response of government to the crisis as a disgrace. Let me state again, the Western diplomats described the response of the government to the crisis as a disgrace. The Senate is disturbed that already we are losing so many of our children under 5 years to these extreme conditions in the affected areas. The Senate is concerned that though on the 17th of November 2015, this Senate, in recognition of the dire situation in the northeastern part of the country by its resolution, raised the amount proposed by the executive in the budget for the IDPs from 6 billion to 10 billion naira. The Senate is worried that the presidential initiative on Northeast, which was inaugurated by President Buhari a year ago to manage the crisis, is yet to show tangible result on ground, with over half of the money appropriated to it released. So the Senate is also worried that notwithstanding the huge budgetary allocation by the National Assembly and the various releases by the executive, as exemplified in the table below, including significant donations from many donors, the situation on ground is not cheering. It's not something to write home about. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, there is actually a robust provision on the ground in order to tackle the problem of the Northeast, even under presidential initiative on Northeast. But where we are, the presidential initiative on Northeast, instead of carrying its own statutory functions as enshrined by the policy document setting it up, they are busy dishing out contracts to friends, relations, and what have you. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, from the motion, you can see that we have itemized 21 items in this table. Most of Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I was actually my attention was drawn to the fact that the microphone is off. So let me restate. The Senate is also worried that notwithstanding the huge budgetary allocation by the National Assembly and the various releases by the executive, as exemplified in the table below, including significant donations from many donors, the situation on the ground is not something to write home about. Here we are under the presidential initiative of Northeast. They are granting contracts to relations or those in the corridors of power without having bearing, the positive bearing on the lives of the people in the Northeast. We cannot fold our arms and watch this thing going on under our watchful eyes. I know that an injury to one is an injury to all. Where an issue affecting Northeast, it also affects the other parts of the country. I want my colleague, no matter whose ox is goat, this issue must be investigated. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the table is here. There is actually a particular company. The Senate is further worried that rather than the money appropriated for the IDPs and the Northeast to ameliorate the problems, the focus of the disbursements so far made have been used to further other interests. Each of these is a replet in the summary of transactions so far released. The summary that we have here only covers January to April, only covers transactions bordering January to April. There are also transactions for last year and also a good part of this year, from that is May to date. They are still granting contracts that don't have bearings on the lives of the people. The Senate is bothered that such projects at the award of 80.7 million to JLT Global Technologies for rehabilitation of police station in Squambir, 203.35 million to another company, Josman Technology Limited, for removal of invasive plant species along channels, and another 117 million to Lintex International for supply of temporary shelters with no record of these shelters anywhere. The Senate is further disturbed that rather incoherent and largely fragmented state of the procurement process so far points to a vague and corrupt scheme that is not in tune with helping our people in the Northeast out of their present harrowing experiences and misery. The Senate is aware that the government has made concerted efforts at ameliorating the sufferings of the IDPs. Some other people are working towards undermining same efforts, and we will not agree. The Senate is also aware there are some allegations of diversion of 63 trucks of grains released from the strategic grain reserves allocated to the IDPs in Borno State by the federal government. The Senate is also concerned that the gap, this state of affairs, where so much money has been made available by the government with little to show, for it has created and overburdened the cash-strapped states and local government in the affected areas. The Senate observes that the intensity of the crisis was exemplified in August when IDPs took to the streets in August to obstruct vehicular movement and grounding business activities along the Maiduguri-Kano-Jos Road, the major road leading to Borno, to protest what they claim was a shortage of food. Accordingly, the Senate resolves to constitute an ad hoc committee of the Senate to ascertain how much has been released to the presidential initiative on Northeast and how these funds have been utilized from inception to date, and investigate the diversion of grains and other food items from the strategic grain reserves, NEMA, and other sources for the IDPs. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, why I feel much concerned is because out of the 2.4 million IDPs in Nigeria, 1.9 million people are living in Borno. And even the remaining number, most of them are of Borno extraction. We cannot fold our arms and watch. Certain people actually are taking decisions that suits their whims and caprices. We will not allow that. I know I would like to call on my colleagues on the other side and this side to really support this motion. And another issue that I also want to bring to this hallowed chamber is that the presidential initiative on Northeast, the purpose for creating it is to assess the status and conditions of the liberated communities to determine those ready for occupation. Second is assess and determine in conjunction with other relevant agencies the immediate needs of the returnees. Assess, recommend, implement modalities for returning refugees, IDPs to their communities. Develop a comprehensive resettlement and reintegration plan for the IDPs. Facilitate the provision of adequate relief materials, including effective distribution and impact assessment. Now, this is not what is going on in the Presidential Initiative on Northeast, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. So I would like to kindly call on you to support this motion. I so move, Mr. President. Thank you.
Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I'm Mohamed Ali Ndume, representing Borno South. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, let me start by thanking you for supporting this very important motion. And distinguished colleagues, let me also use this opportunity as a big chance for us, particularly from Borno State and neighboring states of Yobe, Adamawa, and other northeastern states to present our case. Distinguished colleagues, I beg you in the name of God, please take this motion very seriously and let us take our time to do something. Time is not on our side. Yesterday I was in Maiduguri. I came back from Maiduguri. Last week, our distinguished colleagues went to some of the camps in Maiduguri. I wish Mao is still here, or Raji Rasaki is here, to give you a glimpse of the situation we find ourselves. In Borno, the situation there is fair compared to other situations that we find ourselves. Remember, distinguished colleagues, at the peak of this crisis, 22 local governments in Borno State were completely occupied, out of which now, Borno and few others, even though the local government have been recaptured, what is happening around Borno, especially in the local government tract? I give you an example of even my local government. Last time, I tried to go to my own town, 3 years after now, but eventually I could only go with a helicopter. On getting there, I earlier sent food aid to the local government. There is a town called Pulka, which is 15 kilometers from Goza. Distinguished Senator George Akume gave me 3,000 tubers of yam, and we divided it into two. To move from Goza to Pulka, which is 16 kilometers, was impossible. And we had to offload part of the yams he gave us in Goza. And as they stayed there for 7 more days, they start rotting. And we sent a message that they should distribute it to Goza. But the people in Pulka insisted that they should leave it there. Why I'm saying this, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, is that my people were willing and waiting for the rotted yams, for them to still use it as, you call it, what is yam that you cut when it starts getting bad, alubo. They converted that yam to alubo, and they were happy to eat it, and I thank distinguished Senator Akume. Distinguished colleagues, as I say, this Senate is known for standing up when it is necessary and needed. Please, I beg you again in the name of God, stand up. And I want you to please, Mr. President, give me that chance to explain in detail what is happening there so that maybe my colleagues will appreciate our situation. I swear to God, whatever I say here will not be comprehensive enough until one of us that went to Maiduguri, to Dalori camp, that have seen the situation and the condition that people find ourselves. Let me, from here, I distributed some small data. I hope my colleagues have gotten it. A UN Assistant Secretary General Toby Lancer said that world's worst humanitarian crisis could be in Boko Haram region, and you know that means Northeast. And he said, I beg you, Mr. President, without more donor support, the emergency caused by Boko Haram will become the world's worst humanitarian crisis, a top UN official said on Friday. He further said that I have worked, and I quote, I worked in Darfur, referring to the war-torn Sudanese region. The scale and the depth of suffering that I have seen in Nigeria is unparalleled in my experience. He further said that the UN has appealed for 739 million to cover the needs across the entire region known as Lake Chad Basin, but has received commitment of just 197. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the papers I gave you, I made copies. I will just read the headings. Emergency UN fund allocates 13 million to help people in the Northeast. Why I captured this is because $1 million. You can convert that and know what it means. What I'm saying is, if a country or other countries are yelling and wailing for us, then the question is, what are we doing to ourselves? Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I still want to crave your indulgence to just read the first paragraph of a statement made to the Security Council on humanitarian situation in Lake Chad Basin. In part of it, Stephen O'Brien, who is the UN Undersecretary, said, that is to the United Nations Security Council, that Nigeria is bearing the brunt of the crisis, despite the significant efforts undertaken by the federal and local authorities to address this burgeoning catastrophe. 7 million of the 9 million people in need across the Lake Chad Basin are in Nigeria. Also, as the Nigerian Army has progressively regained control of a number of towns and villages in Borno State, up in its northeast center around Maiduguri, aid agencies have gradually been able to access new areas. What we have uncovered and assessed is deeply distressing, alarming, even for those of us who have witnessed such depths of humanitarian crisis need before. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, as I said, this Senate is known for standing up to say or to do something when situations like this arise. The situation in Borno State, as I said, is beyond anybody's imagination. But the sad aspect of it, Mr. President, again, is coming back to what my colleague, distinguished Senator Babakaka, highlighted. During the last administration, that is in the 7th Senate, I brought similar motion, and this Senate unanimously supported the prayers and urged the federal government then to release grains from the strategic grain reserve. Mr. President, Jonathan then responded appropriately and directed that 600 trucks be released from the strategic grain reserve. The unfortunate story, Mr. President, as I speak to you now, that is in 2014. Up to now, over 100 trucks have been diverted and missing. Over 100. out of the 600. Then recently, this Senate, we remember, we brought another motion, and this Senate also urged the federal government to make sure they release grains from the strategic grain reserve. Mr. President also accordingly responded by directing that 300 trucks be released from the strategic grain reserve. Up to now, as I speak to you, Mr. President, out of the 113 trucks allocated to Borno State, only 53 have been delivered. 63 trucks were diverted. We immediately responded, that is the 3 senators from Borno, and reported the case. The unfortunate thing again, Mr. President, is that up to now, we have not been able, or the authorities, the appropriate authorities have not been able to recover those grains. And coming back to the issue of buying, because we are directly concerned, we have been following. Baba Kaka made some revelations. Yes, the Senate raised the allocation from 6 billion to 10 billion. And we understand, as the committee that will investigate this matter will also reveal, that substantial amount has been released to the presidential initiative for Northeast. Because at this point, Mr. President, I must say that the president, our president, President Muhammad Buhari, is deeply concerned, and therefore he issues and responds to those requests immediately. But instead of supplying food or providing food to those people affected, besides the diversion, which is more of a syndicate operating in the Ministry of Agriculture. Because when the 3 of us went to complain about the diversion of those grains, we found out, unfortunately and sadly, that it was the same contractor that diverted those grains during the Jonathan administration that was also awarded the contract for the transportation. That is what we found out. And we also discovered, Mr. President, as it will further be revealed, that instead of taking these grains, for example, from Jos to Maiduguri, they take it from Jos as delivery and then discharge it in Gombe, what do you call that, silos, as supply to the federal government. That means they will release it, it will not go to Maiduguri or Borno State, and it will be supplied to the federal government as new supply of grains. That was the vicious cycle they were operating. But as we said, Mr. President, in our prayers, we hope that the details will be unearthed. And as I said, the money given to the pine, Baba Kaka mentioned, I was baffled to see in the releases that 223 million contract was awarded to a company to remove what they call invasive plant species along the river channel. You can imagine. I was trying to calculate how many trucks of gari or wheat or millet or grain or beans that 223 million could buy. As I said, our people are in danger. This Senate, I know, and I believe strongly, will stand up to it and make sure that we do the right thing. If we don't do the right thing, God forbid, the humanitarian crisis as stated by not only us, but other NGOs. And let me not bore you, and let me say, distinguished colleagues, the disgrace word used by the international community is coming from the fact that if today or now you go to Maiduguri, where is accessible Obama, the people that you see are active there in supporting people are either the local people or the international NGOs who are mostly white that are there very busy, but you hardly see the presence of the federal government except NEMA. NEMA has been overburdened, NEMA is visible, but what they are doing is so little and so insignificant. Distinguished colleagues, I want to thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward to your support. Let us do something before it's too late. Okay. Having said that, I want to, because the DSP is reminding me that he's supposed to be the co-sponsor of this bill. In fact, he was bothering me several times that what are you doing about this motion? If you are not bringing the motion, he will bring the motion himself. So I want that amendment to reflect the name of the DSP and other colleagues of ours that are in support of this motion. With that, I want to wholeheartedly and call on everybody to please support the motion. Thank you.
Distinguished colleagues, you know, we had talked about the issue of trying to limit discussion on motion, but because this matter, honestly, is a humanitarian crisis, and really it's not, I don't think it's only as regards just the IDPs, it also has its own impression as a country. I mean, how can a man that works in the United Nations say that the situation is worse than Darfur? I think this is a great indictment to us. So I think that I will allow everybody to contribute so that we can come up with suggestions on how to address this matter and begin to restore the right kind of image for us in addressing the return measure. JSP, are you still? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very distinguished colleagues. Let me start by thanking Senate leader and the mover of this motion, because that's what representation is all about. That's exactly why we are here. They are doing exactly the job those IDPs expect them to do when they defied all odds to vote for all of us, for our colleagues, those from the Northeast, from the discomfort of their camps. They were part of the electoral process. They voted so that some of us will be here. So I want to thank them for living up to that expectation, because I expect them to come here and raise issues that concerns them. I also would like to thank Princess Ozobia, who was one of the earliest to bring this humanitarian crisis to our attention. One morning I was leaving my house for the chambers. I spent another 20 minutes watching AIT and saw the degree of hunger and starvation that was taking place in the northeast of Nigeria. And I wept. I wept because I saw and understand what they are going through. Of hunger, because I too was a victim, and starvation. I was born a few years before the Nigerian Civil War. We found ourselves in a similar situation that our younger ones, our brothers and sisters are going through today in the Northeast. In 1968, in the Northeast of Nigeria, it was said that the Biafran crisis was then the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. Today, in 2016, I understand what they are being told, that the part of Nigeria is suffering again the worst humanitarian crisis. And it pains me, and I believe it pains all of us. I was born a few years before the Nigerian Civil War. Excellency, distinguished colleagues, we found ourselves in a similar situation of these camps. That I've been to the camps, younger ones, our brothers and sisters, understand what they are going through in the Northeast. In 1960s, colleagues, it was said that the celebration would have a crisis. The truth of the matter is that we are discussing now in the world. We are not part of those celebrations. Today, in 2014, unless we do something today and quickly too, they will not be part of the next celebration. Because every day it's becoming very late. Most of them will die in the next 24 hours. It behoves on all of us as leaders to ensure that this does not happen. We do not know who will be what tomorrow. It was reported that the present president of Gabon was an Igbo man, or a Igbo man, who was rescued from this kind of situation by the then president of Gabon, adopted him as a child. Today he's president of the country. So we're not sure who will become, who will be what, who will save who, and who will play a particular role. So it behoves on all of us to show particular concern about what is going on in the Northeast, especially the issue of the humanitarian crisis and the starvation going on there. Your Excellency, distinguished colleagues, I have looked at the statistics presented to us in this motion. Looking at it critically, I don't think I will need any further investigation to know that there's fraud here. The first two items is the reference to conference. Then the second, the third and fourth relates to consultancy. What does a hungry man have to do with consultancy and conference? How are we addressing the issue of hunger by conferencing and giving money to people for consultancy? And if you look at the dates at the last column, those first two items were released one single day. Then the issue of the consultants, they received 3 payments in one single day, split contracts. Apparently, this money had gone to some people's pockets. If you look at 8, 9, 10, and 11, 8 is talking about payment for supply of non-food items to Boronu. 10 is talking about payment of supply of food items to Boronu. Then 11 is consolidated. It says payment of supply of creative materials, food and non-food items to the same Boronu, to the same company called Isios Investment Limited. They were all released same day, 30th of March 2016. So if you look through all these things, you don't need any accountant to tell you that some people are making fortunes on account of other people's misfortune. So I believe, Your Excellency, distinguished colleagues, that this is not just a matter of going to investigate, this requires public hearing. Nigerians need to know who are behind these companies, and more, what monies have been released and to who, and what they have used it for. Unless and until we do this as quickly as possible, many more of our people will continue to die in the northeast of Nigeria, and God forbid that we will sit here as leaders and watch this to happen. I support this motion.
Senator Samayan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very distinguished colleagues. My name is Senator Samayan, I represent Imo East, Imo State. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, when the mover of this motion, Senator Babakaka, was speaking and doing analysis, and during the analysis of this motion, my heart was very disheartening. I see this as another Dasuki gate. I call this one IDP's gate, Mr. President, because this is very disheartening. Today we are talking about economic recession, that even those who are capable, even those who are working, it's very difficult to feed their families. Talk less of those who are in this IDP's camp, who depend on our mercy to supply them what to eat. And somebody in the corridors of power or in the bedroom of power is diverting all these food items meant for the less privileged, for the IDPs. Mr. President, to me, even though you have given us the liberty to deliberate on this motion, I think that this motion doesn't require much deliberation. I thought that probably what should have done is to go straight ahead, to immediately mandate another committee to look very holistically, aggressively, these issues raised by and especially the companies so attached in this motion and operators of these companies. I think, Mr. President, this revelation is just a part of what is more in this motion. I believe that is very disheartening. This is mass inhumanity to man. And we are preaching the change starts with me. And I think, Mr. President, this motion is one of the motions that this Senate will be judged by the public whether we are serious with our oversight motion or not. I therefore, Mr. President, support this motion wholeheartedly. And that whoever, Mr. President, whoever, is only when when this SUV car is given to a senator, it becomes a public thing. But the people in the government who are perpetrating this kind of act, Mr. President, they must be brought to the book so that the whole world, the whole Nigerians, even the international community that has been helping Nigerians to feed these IDPs will know those who are behind this issue of massive humanity to man. I therefore support this motion wholeheartedly and its entirety. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Abukeri.
Thank you, Mr. President. My distinguished colleagues, my name is Senator Abukari, representing Borno North. My distinguished colleagues, you could see the passion and emotion in which the previous speakers have spoken, especially the mover of the motion and the leader of the Senate. And it is because they have first-hand experience of the devastation and the humanitarian crisis that is presently going on in the Northeast. I myself am a victim. Just on Saturday, 2 days ago, on 1st October, on Independence Day, my governor and I visited my local government headquarters for the first time in 2 years. We went there, and believe me, there was a place we stood, and I couldn't even recognize where we are in that town, Damasak, headquarters of Mobile local government. Unless you see it, you would never, ever fathom the kind of destruction and the devastation that has happened. It is in this vein that I wonder, are we in the same environment or same thinking with where you have one arm of government fighting to restore peace, that is the gallantry of the Nigerian armed forces, and then one section of the administration is taking advantage, undue advantage, of the sufferings and the problems of this, especially the women and children. It's very disheartening, Your Excellency, Mr. President, that somebody could supervise over such huge monumental fraud to take advantage of the sufferings of the people. Senator Babaka Kakarbe has mentioned a lot of these. He has even presented with some tables. But I was able to also understand that there are some that is not even here. There is the case of the temporary shelters, my distinguished colleagues. If you see, there's the listing of the consultancy. It's a part payment of the consultancy to do with temporary shelters. Do you need a consultant to tell you what kind of temporary or what kind of shelter do you need? That contract is valued at 763 million to provide temporary shelter. Temporary shelter that is not even conducive for that environment. We all know the Northeast is, when it's hot season, it's very hot. When it's in the cold season, it's very cold. These temporary shelters are even not, they're preferred and they're not even conducive, because during the hot season, it becomes very, very hot and very unbearable. And what else? Why can't you build temporary shelters? That is what we were looking for. We want people to go back to their communities. Those liberated communities should be developed immediately. And the other issue is the issue of farming. We have not, for instance, my own constituency, no farming had taken place in the last 3 years. My local government was sacked just on the verge of harvesting, exactly 3 years ago. So they have not reaped out the harvest of what they have sown for that 2014. They have not farmed in 2015 and 2016. People are in dire straits. They are hungry, they are angry. And I think what we need to do as a government, and the government should go immediately, is to provide emergency succor so as to prevent this malnutrition and the humanitarian crisis that it's already has started manifesting itself. Distinguished colleagues, what does it mean to remove species or invasive species in a river channel when people are hungry? You have not even provided them space for them to farm, and you are there in the name of contract. And we are able to understand also that the removal of these invasive species were done manually with hand, not even with the organized company or with some mechanical or mechanized way, but normal laborer with doing it removal with hand. So with this, we went also, like the leader mentioned, we went to the Ministry of Agri in respect of the 63 missing trucks. I don't want to say it here, but I must say it because the attitude of the permanent secretary of Federal Ministry of Agri is really, really disheartening. In fact, I was really upset. I wanted to even walk out. Because when the leader mentioned, when he went to Maiduguri and discovered that the 63 trucks were missing, only 53 were delivered. So by the calculation, 63 were missing, and he made a press statement. The leader made a press statement. This is what he saw. And immediately the palm sec was attacking him. And this was 2 months ago. And up to now, as we are speaking, not a single truck had been delivered after those 53 trucks. And like he said, it was the same contractor that was given last year who diverted almost 95 trucks of grains, and he was awarded again this year. And when we inquired, we said, why was he awarded again? They said, they now found out the mistake that they have made, and they said, no, he was subcontracted. So I would want the subcommittee, the ad hoc committee that would be set up, to also investigate the circumstances of which they would, how they awarded the same contract to the same person that had a case last year. So with this, my distinguished colleagues, like I said, the emotions are there, the problems are there on ground. What we need to do is to take a holistic and emergent, urgent steps. Because right now, I'm happy Senator Tejo Osho is here. Okay, I saw Senator Fatima Raji-Razaki. They were in Maiduguri on Friday, and they went, led by Senator Oluremi Tinubu, and they went and saw the humanitarian crisis in the IDP camps. Now, they went to the second largest IDP camp, which had 33,000 people. The largest is about 60,000 in Dikwa, where they have over about 30-something thousand orphans, no parents. And the one in Dalori is about, I think about 13,000 orphans. So you could see the kind of magnitude, the devastation. These are the ones in camps alone, not to talk of those that are in host communities. His Excellency, the Governor of Borno, just mentioned 2 days ago that the humanitarian crisis had taken, the toll on it is over 100,000, not 20,000 as claimed by the media. It's over 100,000. When you have almost 100,000 orphans, of course, it means that those that are dead are also exceeds that amount. So with this, I urge my colleagues, I know it's a straightforward thing. I could see the faces of everybody here, and everybody wants to support this motion. So I thank you in advance for supporting this motion. Thank you, Your Excellency.
Senator Mohammed Hassan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am Mohammed Hassan. I represent Yobe South. I would start by saying that I rise to second this motion because so far it hasn't been seconded to by who. I wholeheartedly second this motion. And to say that going through the lists or the figures released by the mover of this motion, I ran through the figures and I arrived at a total sum of 1,268,518,230 naira that has so far been spent in the Northeast. Now, this figure is quite mind-boggling. And to say that my hometown, which is Potiskum in Yobe State, it's one of the towns that has suffered so much from this insurgency attacks. If we could recall, in 2012, a government science secondary school in Potiskum was attacked by the insurgents while the school children were attending their weekly assemblies. And in that attack, over 70 school children were killed. Till date, not a single federal government delegation has visited that school or any support to the parents or to the school. Two, The biggest cattle market in West Africa is in Portisco. This cattle market was attacked where over 200 people were killed. Again, till date, not a single federal government delegation has visited this market, not to even talk of compensation. Another secondary school, Mamudo, was attacked in 2014. Over 40 school children too were killed. And again, if you could recall, before 2015, June 2015, Portiskum was attacked on a weekly basis. Now, this attack has brought a lot of sufferings to our people. And to say, going through this list, I've not seen any allocation or any effort made by federal government to Yobe South Senatorial District. And again, I would want to add that not only should this ad hoc committee investigate the utilization of these funds, they should go further to identify the directors of these companies that handle these contracts. We should identify them and appropriate sanctions should be meted on them as individuals, because these people are heartless and they are wicked. And then finally, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, we were in Borno State with you, Mr. President, last year with some of our colleagues, and we saw the level of crisis there. I think it is a very high time this ad hoc committee not only does this investigation there, they should visit these IDP camps for their eyes. Thank you very much.
So, Senator Lidani.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Joshua Lidani, representing from the South. I would like to contribute a little to this debate because it is a humanitarian crisis of the gravest proportions. It appears we have even underestimated the gravity of this situation. It's a situation where we should hold our heads, we should bow down our heads in shame as a nation and as a country. That people who have escaped the bullets of Boko Haram will now be dying of anger. It is indeed a shame. And it's even more shameful that the foreigners, foreign aid agencies are the ones that are contributing to alleviating the sufferings of the people while we as a nation sit down and do nothing. I've looked at the papers passed around by Senator Ali Ndume, and I'm really, really alarmed, especially if you look at the second page, where UNICEF is saying that unless we scale up now, 7 to 8 children will die of severe acute malnutrition every hour. 7 to 8 children will die every hour. Which means if 7 to 8 children will die every hour, in 12 hours, we'll have about 80 people, 80 children dying. In 24 hours, we'll have about 160 children dying. I think this calls for sober reflection, Mr. President. We shouldn't allow this situation to continue. Somebody from UNICEF, I think sometime earlier this year, said about 3 children are dying every hour in these IDP camps. And yet, we never express any outrage, we never express any concern. I think the situation has reached such an alarming proportion that this Senate has to rise to the occasion and set up a very powerful committee with a powerful mandate to investigate the atrocities that have been committed in these IDP camps. And I'm also worried that we have done nothing to rehabilitate the people who are in the ID camps to enable them to go back to their places of Are we going to keep them in the IDP camps forever? Something should be done in order to ensure that they go back to their homes as soon as possible. Massive rehabilitation, massive renovation of their houses should be embarked upon. Infrastructure should be provided. And this is something that the federal government, the state government, and the local government should contribute and do something about it. I noticed, Mr. President, that of the amount that has been budgeted for is about 10 billion. If we look at the table that has just been released, just about 1 billion has so far been released. What has happened to about 9 billion? Why has this money not been released by the federal government? I think something needs to be done. Apart from the presidential initiative on Northeast, the federal government too has a responsibility to release money in order to bring succor to the people in the IDP camps. So instead of restricting our prayers to the presidential initiative, we should also have another prayer that should ascertain what happened to the money that was budgeted by the federal government to be released to the IDP camps. So that we have two prayers, one for the presidential initiative, one for the federal government, and also for other initiatives. Mr. President, this calls for really drastic action, and I feel pain that people in the Northeast are suffering. They are dying because of our gross negligence, and because as a nation we feel we're unable to be outraged by what is going on. I support this motion wholeheartedly, and I urge us to do something about it. Thank you.
Senator Nala.
Thank you very much, Mr. President and my distinguished colleagues. Earlier on, the Deputy Senate President had made some analysis about the table of contents of the contracts that were allegedly given. But Mr. President, what should worry you is the fact that PCNI conference, 50 million was given as contribution to the conference. And then on the same date, another contribution was given for conference on rebuilding of the Northeast, the same 50 million. So for every conference, 50 million contribution is given. Maybe for this debate itself, the Senate may ask for contribution of 50 million from this people. Again, you will see, Mr. President, that payment for supply of food items in Borno, 50,299,270. But curiously again, there was another contract for payment for supply of relief materials, food and non-food items. Again, that same contract cost 50,299,270. Now, for food, the same amount. For food and non-food items, the same amount was disbursed. Then, Mr. President, you curiously see 15, 16, and 17. One is called Dantex Nigeria Limited. The other is called Lintex. And what was it? Payment for supply of food and non-food items, 258 million. That was paid on the same 1st of April through Zenith Bank. But again, the company Lintex was paid 117 in a different account in Keystone. Cumulatively, Mr. President, 225 million was disbursed for provision of temporary shelter to IDP. 225 million. Myself and the Deputy Senate President visited this camp. What we saw cannot even go for maybe 4 million. And curiously, if you follow the items as they are being disbursed, it's a syndicated contract, so that it does not go outside the bar of approval, and therefore is syndicated in such a manner as to get this money across without having to follow due process, which in itself is an offense under the Procurement Act. So, Mr. President and my colleagues, I think this is one serious matter that the Senate must be seen to be determined to unearth through the public hearing as suggested by my colleagues. In conclusion, Mr. President, I will say that even from the list submitted of the contracts so far awarded, there is no reasonable person that will not come to a conclusion that this is intended to continue to commit fraud on this much needed money that has been made available for the purpose of restoring life to our brothers and sisters in North East. And that's why I'm strongly coming in support of this motion, and that I strongly recommend that public hearing should be the intent through an ad hoc committee. Thank you, Mr. President.
Distinguished colleagues, I would like you to bear with me because there are a lot of people that want to speak. I know you want to President Senator Kemade.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Barnabas Gemade, Benue, Northeast Senatorial District. Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, I rise with a very heavy heart in sympathy with our brothers and sisters, very, very downtrodden Nigerians who are very unfortunate to be in the territory of Boko Haram, who have suffered the fate which every free man in the world will hate to find himself in. It is very disheartening indeed. Until one goes to where IDPs are, no matter where, he will not really understand the depth of deprivation of a person who does not have a home, who does not have property, and who does not have food. It is very disheartening indeed that upon all this, we find the palliative measure taken by government to be so abused by this committee, as has been so eloquently presented by the mover of this motion, Senator Kaka of Borno Central. Mr. President, Nigeria is becoming a country where very few people can be trusted with money. No matter what you do, and it's quite surprising that a presidential committee put together by the President of the Federal Republic, who is so passionate about this problem of the Northeast, will result in this sort of activity. In a matter where the majority of the payments on this list, as can be seen,
is to ensure that we establish the phases at which the issues of the IDPs will be considered. Phase 1 is an emergency. These are people who have no food, people who have no shelter, or partially accommodated. It is therefore necessary and imperative that such needs and requirements